페더럴 인포메틱스 대표이자 이제 아산병원 영상의학과 김경원입니다. 제가 말씀드릴 내용은 이제 이미징 코어 랩 또는 이미징 CRO에 대해서 좀 전반적인 내용을 말씀드리고요. 오늘의 주제가 글로벌이라서 RAD-MD의 창업자 역시 레디올로지스트입니다. 닥터 샴시를 모시고 이제 또 말씀을 들어보겠습니다. 이제 제가 이거를 처음 시작한 2017년만 해도 약간 생소했는데 지금은 이제 많이 알려져 있습니다. 그래서 결국 센트럴 인디펜던트 리뷰, 즉 독립적 영상 평가가 필요하게 됐는데 궁극적인 목적은 이제 이 이미지 리뷰죠. 그래서 이것을 위해서 필요한 것이 각 병원으로부터 데이터를 잘 모아야 됩니다. 근데 모을 때 촬영 시점부터 굉장히 잘 짜여진 표준화된 프로토콜로 촬영을 해야 되고 이것을 모으고 그래야만 이제 이미징 평가가 원활하게 돌아가고 릴라이어블한 데이터를 얻을 수가 있습니다. 근데 여기가 끝이냐? 이거 아니고요. 여기서 데이터가 나오면은 분석 데이터가 나오면은 이거를 이제 이미징 데이터 매니지먼트까지 수행을 하고 이제 CRO의 스태팀으로 넘기는 데이터 트랜스퍼까지 원활하게 진행이 되어야 되고요. 판독자분들이 판독을 할 수 있는 이 표준 영상 판독 폼도 필요합니다. 또한 이런 과정이 이제 수기가 아니고 IT 시스템으로 돌아가게 되어 있습니다. 그리고 나중에 식약처나 FDA에서 인스펙션이 나올 때 이 모든 과정이 투명하게 트래킹이 되어야 합니다. 그래서 이미징 CRO는 클리니컬 리서치 또는 트라이얼의 이미징이 필요한 부분을 서포트하기 위한 기관이고요. 결국 제약회사 CRO IIT 같은 경우는 연구자분들이 주요 대상입니다. 그리고 이미징이 데이터 용량이 커요. CT, MRI. 그리고 이제 사실 이미징 데이터들 보면 참 정신이 없습니다. 이게 굉장히 많은 데이터들을 한 곳으로 취합하고 이걸 분류와 관리하는 일도 이제 상당히 까다로운 일입니다. 그래서 이제 스페셜 팀과 시스템이 필요한 상황이고요. 또한 이제 이미징에 대한 글로벌 스탠다드와 규정들이 이제 어느 정도 상당히 정립이 된 상태입니다. 그래서 FDA에서 2018년에 이런 가이던스를 냈고요. 그래서 지금은 이 2018년 가이던스에 따라서 이제 세계의 모든 이미징 CRO가 이를 따라서 수행을 하고 있습니다. 근데 이미징 가이던스 읽어보면은 굉장히 디테일해요. 이제 이거는 영상의학과 전문가가 썼구나라는 느낌이 이제 확 듭니다. 그래서 이를 맞추기 위해서는 또 이제 스페셜 팀이 필요한 상황이고요. 여기서 보시면은 그래서 이미징 엔드포인트에 대한 기준, 어떻게 촬영하는가, 어퀴지션에 대한 기준, 이제 디스플레이, 아카이빙, 인터프리테이션에 대한 기준을 이미징 CRO에서 스폰서와 CRO하고 같이 협의해서 만들고 이제 각 파티, 스폰서 CRO, 각 병원 그리고 FDA, 이미징 인더스트리에 이 가이던스를 따라서 이 스탠다드를 세우고 프로젝트를 수행을 해야 합니다. 그래서 이 이미징 마켓은 최근에 이제 상당히 급성장하고 있고요. 한국을 보면은 2017년에 비해서 지금 5년이 지났는데 한국 내 마켓도 이제 상당히 커지고 있습니다. 그래서 아산 이미지 매트릭스라고, 이거는 100% 병원 내에 있는 아산병원 임상시험센터 내 조직입니다. 이게 한국 최초의 이미징 CRO이고요. 아카데믹 이미징 CRO로서 역할을 하고 있는데 우리나라 이제 제약회사 프로젝트를 지금까지 52개 수행을 해왔고요. 한 70~80%는 다 온콜로직 트라이얼입니다. 그런데 이제 이 글로벌에 대한 수요가 이제 최근에 계속 생기고 있습니다. 이제 대부분은 우리나라 제약회사가 해외에서 임상을 하고 싶다라는 그런 수요가 증가를 하고 있고요. 이제 반대로 그 글로벌 제약회사가 우리나라에서 임상 시험을 하는 경우에는 이제 멀티내셔널 트라이얼 중에 우리가 하나의 사이트 역할을 하는 것이고, 그거는 이미 글로벌 이미징 CRO가 한국 내에 이제 들어와서 역할을 하고 있습니다. 그래서 이 글로벌 얼라이언스의 일단 그 좁은 의미는 이 우리나라 제약회사가 해외로 나갈 때 이제 서포트하겠다는 의미에서 일단은 글로벌 얼라이언스를 이렇게 조직을 했고요. 이제 C&R과 트라이얼 인포메틱스가 이제 이 중심축에 있고, 이 TI 이미지는 그 싱가포르에 본사를 둔 이제 TI의 자회사이고, 서울 아산병원은 그 전문 판독 센터화, 그래서 굉장히 그 고급 그 리더들이 이제 포진해 있습니다. 근데 이제 미국이나 유럽에서 임상 시험을 할 경우에는 그 이제 US Certified Board Radiologist 또는 유럽의 그 영상의학과 그 의사들의 판독이 필요한 경우들이 있고, 또 RAD-MD는 이제 그쪽에 레귤레이션을 그 맞춰줄 수 있는 이제 많은 경험을 갖고 있어서 글로벌 파트너로서 저희는 이렇게 얼라이언스를 맞춰서 그 프로젝트를 진행을 하고 있습니다. 그래서 이 제 간단한 소개이고요. TI 이미지능은 이제 싱가포르에 본사를 두고, 즉 아시아 퍼시픽 마켓에서 역할을 하겠다라는 그 뜻으로 그 시작을 하고 있습니다. 아산 이미지 매트릭스는 벌써 이제 52개 프로젝트, 상당히 굉장히 경험이 많이 쌓인 상태입니다. 그래서 그 이제 제가 여기까지 그 이제 한국에서 어떻게 지난 5년간 이렇게 그 좀 성장해왔고, 앞으로는 어떻게 이제 우리나라 제약회사들을 서포트하겠다라는 걸 말씀을 드렸고요. 이제부터는 요 이제 RAD-MD의 말씀을 이제 좀 이따 들어보겠습니다. 그리고 마지막으로 이 IT 시스템이 굉장히 중요하거든요. 그래서 이미징 IT 시스템은 그 일반적인 ECRF보다 이제 좀 다릅니다. 이게 디지털 데이터를 다루기 때문인데요. 그래서 이게 2017년에 저희가 처음 시작했을 때는 그 우리나라에서는 이러한 IT 시스템이 없어서 그 직접 만들었고, 이제 트라이얼 인포마틱스라는 회사를 설립하면서 이 내부의 이미지 트라이얼이라는 그 IT 시스템을 이제 자체적으로 개발을 했습니다. 이 이미지 트라이얼, 즉 이미징 시스템에서 그 이미징을 다룬다는 것 외에 이제 이미징에 특화된 이런 레귤레이션 테크놀로지를 이제 만족시켜야 되고요. 저희는 이 모든 것을 다 지금 만족시킨 상태입니다. 또한 그 C디스크라고 이제 아까도 이제 얘기가 나왔는데, 이제 이미징의 C디스크도 그 상당히 난이도가 높아서 저희는 이런 이제 텔레 레디올로지 테크닉을 통해서 얻어진 이 데이터 분석 데이터를 이 C디스크화하고 있습니다. 또한 이것은 이제 아산병원에서 쓰고 있는 에이크로라는 시스템이고, 지난 5년간 그 52개 프로젝트를 이제 대부분은 요거를 써서 그 수행을 해오고 있습니다. 지금은 굉장히 안정화돼서 이렇게 잘 쓰고 있고요. 그래서 지금 이것도 이제 글로벌 또는 이제 새로운 스탠다드에 맞춰서 업데이트가 좀 필요해서 이 자체도 업데이트를 준비 중에 있습니다. 그래서 제가 말씀드릴 부분은 이제 우리나라 이미징 CRO IT 시스템에서 간단히 말씀을 드렸고, 이제는 이제 닥터 샴시에게 다음 강의를 부탁드리겠습니다.
In next few minutes, I'll talk a little bit about our company and the trends that are happening in imaging based on FDA and EMA guidance. So Professor Kim has already talked about us. My partner, Dr. Rick Pat, and myself, both are radiologists, and we were head of clinical development and oversaw 100 global clinical trials that resulted in 15 approvals. We started RAD-MD in 2006 to create a unique imaging service provider to fill the gaps in imaging CRO world. It's not only our experience, but we tried to gather significant experience from all leaders in the industry in operational level. As you can see, our top management has more than 15-year experience, and they have been with imaging core labs, various imaging core labs. This is, we provide expertise-based service to provide best service to our clients. We have three verticals. We have full service core lab. All our PMs are imaging specialists. And then we have reader service. We have more than 300 plus expert radiologists. We started with radiologists, but now we also have other experts. And I'll talk about this a little bit later. We developed BRITI. BRITI stands for Blinded Reader Investigator and Training Institute. I have a slide for that later. We also provide regulatory strategy. We have experience with 42 global agencies. We have submitted data to those agencies. This is our oncology experience. As you can see, we have done clinical trials in almost all oncology areas. The trials we participated in, we have 40 phase 2 and phase 3 trials that were utilized for FDA approval. This is our non-oncology experience. We developed a lot of contrast agents for radiopharmaceutical and MRI and CT, significant cardiology, neurology experience. I wanted to mention specifically AI trials, artificial intelligence trials that are requiring more and more independent reads, and they're growing very fast in terms of both volume and numbers. And other new developing area is liquid biopsy. Those trials also require imaging confirmations, so that area is another growth area. So Rick and I both developed this large pool of readers. Initially, we started with radiologists, but now radiology, the imaging has grown out of radiology. So gastroenterologists are doing endoscopic videos, pathologists are digitizing slides, and all of these data in the end becomes imaging, like dermatologists are taking pictures. So, and they all that data has to be independently read. FDA and EMA recommend to do independent reads to reduce the bias. So all our readers are trained and certified by our institute. We provide readers to all major imaging core labs and directly to the sponsors. So our readers are agnostic to imaging core lab or to the platforms because they read on multiple platforms. Just to give you example of our quality of our readers, in last decade or so, 18 lung cancer drugs have been approved, and 11 of them were read by our readers. I wanted to point out that all our readers are exclusive to RAD-MD. That means that we can manage their workload and we can better manage timeline and their quality. So like I said, we started with radiologists, but now we have oncologists, pathologists, endocrinologists, physicists and technologists and others. And our readers are located, most of them are in the US, but we also have readers in Europe, Asia, and Latin America. I mentioned BRITI. So what is BRITI? It is Blinded Reader and Investigator Training Institute. When we were collecting these pool of readers, we realized that these readers are very good in their clinical work, but have basic knowledge or no knowledge about pharmaceutical practice of medicine. So we started training these readers. So these courses include an audio-visual lecture, a multiple choice test coming from question bank, and once they complete the course, they can print out the certificate and keep in their files. As you know that standardized training is a regulatory requirement. Many of you must have faced audits from regulatory authorities, and when they come, first thing they ask is that where are your training records? So this helps to provide standardized training not only to the readers, but also to the sites. We can also customize the program based on the protocol, and also translations are available. In a recent project, we translated in 15 languages. One of the questions while selecting an imaging core lab is compliance, regulatory compliance. So we have defined quality management systems, SOPs, and policies. We have internal and vendor audit program. It was mentioned about cybersecurity in another presentation. We also have 24/7 live intrusion monitoring. We have employee training program, global data protection regulation from Europe is very big and very strict. So we also have GDPR and GCP training. Our effort are reflected in FDA audit that was in 2021. We had no findings and no corrective actions. An inspector commented that only once before in her 18 years of audit, she had no findings in inspection. So how do we differ from other core labs? We focus on independent review results rather than data management. We utilize qualified new technology platforms to improve efficiency, cost, and results. We encourage to customize rather than doing templated reads. We focus on early phase, but we perform all phases of studies. Conventional core labs, big core labs focus on later phase because they are looking for large number of patient trials. So with that, about introduction to RAD-MD, I'm going to shift gears and talk about regulatory guidance and recommendation based on EMA and FDA. So the imaging guidance recommends when FDA says you should do it, that means that you must do it. So standardization of site qualification. We have seen that when sites are qualified for clinical trial, imaging is usually not a part of site qualification. Our recommendation is that in that questionnaire, please include imaging site qualification that will help you to determine whether the site can perform the protocol required imaging. Standardization of image acquisition is important, and this is a direct quote from FDA's guidance that standardization is essential for an imaging endpoint used in a clinical trial to reduce variability and to ensure interpretability of the results. And also, to do this, you have to create trial-specific imaging process standards. One of the things that we need to define, especially if you're running trials in Europe, in many countries like Germany, they are very concerned about radiation exposure. So we need to prospectively define what would be the radiation exposure if we are doing CT, and if we are doing multiple CTs in follow-up of the patients, what additional radiation dose the patient is getting. People do not realize that imaging impacts patient recruitment and retention in terms of, especially in the US, where the therapeutic trials are performed in freestanding clinics, where patient goes and that freestanding clinic is associated with freestanding radiology practice. So the travel between the practice and the radiology center can impact patient recruitment and retention. So this has to be considered at the time of design of the trial. This is very important point, transparent image collection and image QC process. When FDA or other regulatory bodies come for an audit, they basically want to know how the data was collected. Was there a potential to manipulate the data? So it is very important to keep transparent data, where the data came, who touched it, who QC'd it, and who uploaded it for the read into the platform. We also need to prospectively define image modality selection and justification. So if we are going to say that we are going to do CT, so we need to justify why we are going to do CT, why not MRI. And then trial-specific required imaging has to be prospectively defined. Independent read frequency and turnaround time. Some trials you can do batch reads. That means that you collect data for 30, 40 patients and then start reading. There are also paradigms where you can do real-time reads. For example, when you are doing reads for eligibility and confirmation of progression, or some reads are done in real time also for oncology progression. This is a relatively new concept, collect and hold, where and it is usually done for early phase or phase 2 studies, where sponsors come in and they say that we will collect the images at a CRO, imaging core lab, and the read will be triggered based on the assessment from the sites. This is usually done in early phase, proof of concept, independent reads. We need to prospectively define read paradigm and reader selection. I'll talk about this in the next slide. So what are the read paradigms that are used in clinical trials? It's a single reader paradigm where you use just one reader. And this is done for early phase proof of concept studies, or when imaging is exploratory endpoint, or for eligibility reads, patient eligibility reads. Then there is multiple reader paradigm where you use two reader and one adjudicator paradigm. This is also recommended by regulatory bodies, and this is used in most therapeutic areas. What does this mean is that two readers read all the data, and if there is discrepancy between the two readers, third reader comes as an adjudicator and adjudicate the results of the two readers. Another paradigm is that three individual readers read all the data. This is this is recommendation from the authorities for diagnostic agents and radiopharmaceutical development. Then there is new thing that has come up for artificial intelligence trials, a large number of readers. We were involved in a trial where they required more than 90 readers because they have to test the artificial intelligence algorithm across the read platforms. Then there are non-radiology reads. So FDA and EMA are discussing about that many times radiology response is not reflected in clinical response. So they are asking independent oncologists to come in and look at clinical picture plus the radiology assessment and provide clinical response. So now we have oncologists and neurologists reading oncology trial or neurology trial. Dermatologists are taking images we talked about earlier. Pathology reads are increasing. That's a big trend of growth, that pathology slides are being scanned and being independently read. A word about reader qualification. When we selected readers for therapeutic trials, we would say, if you were to come to us and say that we need colorectal cancer trial, readers for colorectal cancer trial, so we would look into therapeutic area expertise, their current clinical experience, their clinical trial experience, their independent read experience and publications in colorectal cancer, for example. But there is new reader qualification required for artificial intelligence trials, because FDA and EMA are asking for varied therapeutic area experience, because the AI algorithm is going to be used not only by experts, but also by residents with experience less than 5 years for more than 5 years. This is one of the trials that we were involved in, where they asked 3 categories of readers. In one trial, they asked us readers not associated with the universities, so they wanted to have this algorithm tested for radiologists who are not experts, who are not academicians, who are not associated with universities. They are freestanding facility radiologists. In one trial, a stroke AI trial, they asked us for emergency physicians, because they are the doctors who see the images first before it goes to the radiologist, at least in the US. This is a big question, US versus non-US readers. We had that discussions with FDA many times. Non-US readers are acceptable for therapeutic area trials and other trials. We have submitted data to the FDA with non-US readers. This is a misconception that FDA requires US board certified readers, but most of the sponsors prefer to have US readers. This is different for AI trials. FDA in that situation is asking, in one of the projects that we were involved in, was asking about US readers for AI trial, because the AI algorithm is going to be used in the US. So I think this is my last slide. Thank you very much for your attention.